Hello! So what we're going to do is have a look at some of the basic shapes that you need to know about and see how the light source will affect where the shadows will be and where your highlights will be. In this video, I'm going to be concentrating on the light source, the core shadow and the reflected light. We'll have a look at the occlusion shadow, the cast shadow and the ambient light in another session. So what we've got here is our sphere, and what we're going to have a look at is the light source. So you can see we've put that in now. That's coming from the top left hand side, and you can see that it's bright where it's first meeting the sphere and then tailors off towards the center. And that's where your core shadow starts. So your core shadow is at its darkest point when the plane of the object starts to move away from the light source. You also need to think about your reflected light. So your reflected light, which I've put in here, is light that is reflecting off surfaces that your object's sitting on. You don't need to worry about reflected light too much, but the reflected light will bring your objects more definition and make them look more realistic. So it's a lovely thing to add into your colouring if you can get your head around it. So I'm going to show you what happens when we move the light source around here. It's a little bit shaky with this program that I've got to show you, but if you can bear with me, I'll show you. So I've moved the light source now to the bottom right hand side, okay? And due to that, we've now got to move the reflected light source to the other side of the sphere. So you can see that this light source that we've got now shining is a little bit more directly in front of the sphere because the core shadow is starting much further backwards. So let's have a look and see what happens when we move the light source to the top center. Okay, so we're going directly at the top of it. You can see that's changed the direction of the light, and the core shadow is going underneath this time. And also because of this, we've got to change where the reflected shadow will be. So the reflected shadow will be coming from directly underneath the object. Okay, I hope that this is making things look a little bit clearer to you, where you can actually see the light actually moving around. Then if we have a look at what it looks like when we move the light directly in front of the object, so we get it right in the center, and you can see that what's happening there is the light is really bright in the center and then starts dulling down towards the edge. You can leave your reflected light in or you can take it off. It's up to you deciding what looks better for your particular image. Then let's have a look and see what happens when we move the light down from below. You get some really good striking effects when you light something from below. And you can see that's changed where the core shadow is starting. And you get very dark in the background. Okay, so let's move on to the next shape. So we've got here, let's put some light on the situation. 1 second, there we go. So here we are, we have got our cylinder. So the cylinder shape, you'll find in lots of objects that you'll be able to take these lessons from and adapt to what you see in real life. We've got this cylinder lit here from the top left, and I've now just put in the reflected light as well, and you can see what that's done is it's just lit up the whole right hand side of that curved surface. And also note where there's a direct change in the plane, then you get highlights and darker areas. I'll go through that a bit more. So if we really look at this cylinder here, you can see that the top flat plane is the same shade as the highlight area on the curved plane. So that means that there's the same amount of light getting to the top as there is from the side. So we're going directly in on that right angle where the two planes meet. Okay. If it was any higher, then the top would be lighter, and if it was any lower, the top would be darker. Now let's concentrate on the actual curved part of the cylinder. It's just like with the sphere, we're thinking about a gradient in the shadows going from lighter to darker. But because you've actually got this cylinder going straight upwards, the shadow that you get will be the same as the top all the way down to the bottom. So you get strips of shadows and highlights rather than the curved ones that you see on a sphere. Now what I was saying about that bright white highlight and the dark shade on the where the two planes meet, that's because the top and the side are the same shade. So what you need to do is put these highlights and shadows in to make a distinct difference between the top and the bottom so that they don't blend together. So let's have a look how quickly the shadows change when you change the light source. So started in the center, I've now moved it directly above and you can see a distinct change. I'm now going to move it down towards the right hand side and you can see it gradually changes, and then all of a sudden, bam, you've got a change in the whole side of that curved surface. And then depending on how far to the side, whether it's behind, below, in front, that will depend on where your core shadow starts. So here I am just putting in some of the reflected shadow on the other side. And you can see that because my core shadow was starting a little bit sooner this time, I've made my reflected shadow just that little bit smaller. It's playing around until it feels correct. Now let's have a look and see what it looks like directly from below. So the top surface is dark, not getting any of the light source, but the whole of that curved surface is lit up, even though we are lighting it from below, from underneath the surface. So let's have a look at the cones. So we've got now a curved surface, but that comes to a point. So the shadows will follow the line of that curved surface from the top to the bottom. So we've got it lit here from the top left hand side again, and then I'm going to put in the reflected light just on the left hand side, and that's going to lighten up that darker area just a little bit and make it look just that little bit more realistic. So I'm going to take away that highlight again, the reflected light, and show you what happens when we move the light angle. So I'm moving it now to direct center, and you can see how that's changed where your lightest parts are and where the shadows start and get darker and darker as you go towards the end. This is where it gets a bit odd. So what I'm doing here is I've moved it so it's a direct light source from the top. You can see it gets lighter at the top, but then it graduates down the cone. It's a little bit more difficult to be able to show 3D in cones with a direct source from the top, as you can see. I'm then going to move it down so it's going to be lit from below. Let's do that. Okay, so lighting it from below, you can see that you've got that gradient moving upwards through the cone now instead. Also on the curved edges too, because they'll be getting less light from below. So you can get some lovely effects with cones when you light from below. So the next shape is a cube, but with one of the edges curved. And we can see the difference now here in the different planes, and also see how that also affects that curved shape. So we're lit from the left hand side top again, and as you can see you've got 3 different colours of the 3 different sides. Adding the reflected light to that darker side has just lit that up just slightly, but it's still dark on the curved section, as you can see. And please also note the highlight on the corner edge of that curve. That helps define that edge. So I've just taken away the reflected light source, and I'm moving the main light source across the center of this cube, and you can see that as that moves, the different planes will change in their shadows, depending on which plane is getting the most light. With flat planes like you have on cubes, the further the angle is directing away from the light, the darker it will be. So if your surface is almost directly in front of the light, then it will be much, much lighter. I would suggest actually having a look at this in real life. Get yourself a cube, make yourself a cube, shine a light on it, and really have a look at how that affects the different sides when you're moving it around. What I've done is I've moved with this cube directly across above to the top right, and then I've moved down the center, and now I've moved it down to below. And when you get directly in the below center like I have here, you can see that the top is dark, but the two planes that are moving upwards are the same shade. And to make that a definite difference between the two, you get that highlight strip going all the way down the line. This effect of the angle of the plane to the light source can be seen in much more detail with this hexagonal prism. So you can see that this light is now from the top left hand side. The top is lit really brightly, and then depending on how angled away from the light source it is, it's getting darker. So if I move this light source now across, there we are, so we're moving it across towards the right, the angle is changing of that plane towards the light source, so much so that now those were the same color. It's now in front of directly in front of the front panel, so the others are getting darker, and now it's at the right hand side, slightly up, so the top's getting a little bit more light than the sides. Move that down a little bit, there we are. It can get a little tricky, but if you think about it in the way of the planes and how they're angled away from the light source, if you try and get those planes to just be slightly different shades, but the same shade across the whole plane, then you'll get some lovely shading going on. So if I leave it there, so we're lit from below, but directly in front of that front panel, you can see that the left-hand panel, because the angle is closer towards the light source, it's lighter than the one on the right-hand side, which is angled far away from the light source, so that one will be darker. I hope that's shed some light on the situation of shadows and highlights. Please also remember that I'm there for you. If you join the tutorial section and then join the chat group in there, you can always message me if there's little bits that you're not quite getting and understanding, and I'll do my very best to tutor you through them and see if we can really work out what's going on with this light source and how it affects the shadow. Okay, so thanks a lot, and I'll see you in the next video.